Let's go ahead and solve homework exercise number 7 from section 3.7, homework exercises. Use a truth table to determine if the symbolic form of an argument is valid or invalid. We've got not P implies not Q. We're given P, therefore can we conclude Q? All right, so the truth table, we've got P's and Q's. So we always start out with true, true, false, false, true, false, true, false. Okay, and what we're going to have to do is determine whether it's a tautology, the first premise, if not P, then not Q, and the second premise, P. Those two, if then, does that always imply, and an if then, the conclusion Q? And the only way the argument is valid is if it's a tautology, which means the last line is all truths. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that. We'll do that statement and see if we get a tautology. So the first thing we would have to do would be not P. Okay, so we'll do that, which makes it false, false, true, true, doing the negation of the P. Then we're going to do the negation of Q, because that's in there, which is false, true, right? From negating, switching the trues and falses from Q. So we've got those two negated, so now we can do this premise number 1, not P implies not Q. So false implies, if false then false is actually true. If false then true is actually true. Whenever the if is false, it's true. If true then false is the only time an if then is false. And if true then true is true. Okay, now we can go ahead and do the two premises together. We've already got P over in column 1. So I'm going to go ahead and do not P and not Q, or I'm sorry, not P implies not Q and P. So we're going to do that statement, the two premises together. So we're looking at column 5 and column 1 together with an and. So true and true is true. True and true is true. False and false is false. And false and true is false. And now finally we've got this statement right here. All of this and implies Q. So we can do our final statement. Okay, so it's going to be this. This will just be our final statement, right? So we're doing, well, let me write it. We're doing column 6 now. So not P implies not Q and P. These two, does it imply Q? So we're doing this column here is the if, and column 2 is the it then part. So if true, then true, right? If true, then true is true. And if true, then false is false. And right away, we don't have to do any more. The only way the argument would be valid is if it was all trues. We already have one false from if true here, then false. The if then is false, so we know the argument is definitely invalid because we already got one false in the truth table. Okay, so we know that we have this answer is definitely invalid. Now you could do this by looking at, see, if you've got one of the invalids is if P then Q, and you've got the negation of P, therefore the negation of Q is the fallacy of the inverse, which is invalid. Now notice you really have this form matches here. We've got not P, then not Q. So we got, but then you got the opposite of not P, which is P. Therefore, can you conclude this one, which is not which is not Q, and that is therefore can you conclude the opposite of not Q, which is Q, and that is definitely invalid. See, it follows the same format, except these two are negated, these are positive. And here in this one, these are positive and these are negated. So the negations just switch. So basically, these two are the same form. So it does match the fallacy of assuming the inverse, so you could do it invalid by that. Okay? So if you can work around with it, you can match it to one of the invalids. Okay? If it matches by switching around the negations. All right. Let's go ahead and do homework exercise number 8. You contributed money. Looks like it's going to be P. Or is a disjunction, we had enough, which is Q. Last week we had enough, which is exactly Q. And the conclusion, therefore last week you did not contribute money, which is not P. Now actually this matches one of the 4 invalid on page 186 of your textbook. On page 186 of your textbook, if you've got if P or Q and you're given Q, therefore concluding P or not P is the misuse of disjunctive reasoning. It's called misuse of disjunctive because it's a fallacy. You can't do it, so it's automatically invalid. So you can match it to one of the 4 invalids on page 186 of the text. So, okay, so the first thing is the format is right here, right, B, and then we know it's invalid by matching it matches one of the 4 invalids on page 186. All right, so B is the format, and it definitely matches one of the invalid on page 186, and so we've got it is invalid. Very good. Number 9. Okay. Here we have if the church bell rings, which we can say is P, then it's noon, we'll say it's Q. It's noon, Q, therefore the church bell rings, P. Now, again, you really don't need to do a truth table for this one because, again, on page 186 of your textbook, this form matches the misuse of the converse, okay, which is called misuse because this is one of the 4 invalid arguments. So it matches one of the 4 invalid arguments exactly, so we know definitely the argument is invalid. So you really don't have to do a truth table on this one. You can just match it to one of the invalids on page 186 of the textbook, and so you definitely know the argument is invalid. Okay, number 10. Translate each into a symbolic form. Okay, so that he rides his bike is P, right? Rides his bike is P. Or he will be in the race, which is Q, P or Q. He will not be in the race, which is the negation of Q. Therefore, he rides his bike, which is P. Now, the argument is valid because on page 186, it matches one of the 4 valid forms, okay? Disjunctive reasoning. On page 186, one of the forms is if you've got one or the other and you don't have, and you have the negation of one of these, then you can definitely conclude the other one is true. So on page 186, this follows the form of disjunctive reasoning, okay? And So it follows one of the four valids, so we automatically know it's valid. Now here we got to go ahead and put the symbolic form. The argument is what? Remember, premise number 1, P or Q, and premise number 2, not Q. Those two imply P. It's written as an if-then. Premise 1 and premise 2 implies the conclusion, which is P. Okay? So we'll go ahead and put that in. So again, it matches one of the four valid. And in symbols, we have to put that whole thing. Then we need P or Q. And premise number 2, which is not Q. Okay, put those together and all those in brackets around it. And then you make an if-then, so a right arrow. He rides his bike, which is P. So there's the argument. If we did a truth table for that, we would get all truths in the last column, which means it's a tautology, which means the argument is valid. But we didn't have to do that because we matched it to one of the forms on page 186 of the textbook. All right, very good. We're going to conclude this session. This is your math teacher, Dr. Swears. I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you for listening to it. If you still need more help with any of these problems, send me an email through the inbox in the Canvas course through the FGCU portal. Okay, again, thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful.